For those of you who may not know, the Snap Art series is a year-long series that goes to many different RC tracks in the Southeast. From Florida all the way to Illinois, this is a series I'd highly recommend. Sean Harding does an excellent job running the whole series, and he puts a lot of work into making it run well. If you're interested in running a few of these races, you can find a schedule for the whole 2022 schedule on their Facebook page, which I will link in the description. If you're new here, first off, I'd like to say welcome, and I appreciate you being here. Secondly, I'd like to remind you to hit the subscribe button if you liked the video and would like to see more. Without further delay, let's begin. Now, if you look at the schedule for Snap Art, you see there are a lot of races throughout the year, but don't worry, you don't need to hit all of them in order to be in point contention. For however many races you hit, be it 3 or all 17, your best 3 placements will be taken and added up. After which, you will head to the final race, which will be worth points and a half. They run every off-road class I can personally think of from both 8th scale and 10th scale. Got the general gist? Good, let's continue. Now, being a full-time student with a part-time job, there's no way I'd be able to make every single one of these races. The Southeast is a big place after all, so I plan to hit the 3 nearest to me: round 1, 11, 14, and the final round number 17. Let's start my experience with round 1. The first race I hit at the beginning of the year was in January, at Hobbytown Columbus. This was also right around when I started my YouTube channel with nothing more than an X6 Sony camera lended to me by my dad, and a SteelSeries gaming headset that I used to record audio. It was also right around the time when I began running Losi for my two-wheel drive buggy, a 5.0 carpet edition which had a few hop-ups to get it closer to an Elite, like a rear pill system being changed, and a few hybrid carbon fiber and aluminum bits. I decided to run 2 classes for the Snap Art series to keep myself focused: two-wheel drive buggy and two-wheel drive short course, also because that's all I really had at the time. My first race of the year for Snap Art went really well. Something I will say though, it's hard for me to remember the exact details of the race itself because it's been a long time and I have the memory of a goldfish. What I do remember about this race is that it went pretty damn well considering it was my first time I had run my Losi 22 on anything other than carpet or turf. In qualifying, I managed to snag 4th place, and in two-wheel drive short course truck, I managed to grab 2nd place spot in the qualifying. As for the mains themselves, they went better and worse technically, though it didn't feel like it at the time. For two-wheel drive buggy, either by luck or by not making any mistakes, I managed to snag a 2nd place overall, only being beat out by Owen Simmons. You'll hear more from him a little bit later. As for two-wheel drive short course truck, I did end up losing a position due to being caught up in some lap chaos, but having to work my way back up, but I still ended up in the podium in 3rd place, so overall, the first round went swimmingly. Round 11, my second race, also took place at Hobbytown Columbus, so at this point I already knew what to expect in terms of how the track would go. Granted, it was my first time on this layout, but overall it wasn't completely foreign to me anymore. What was foreign to me was my new car I had at the time, my 4-wheel drive buggy, a Yokomo YZ4 SF2. This was the first time I had run a 4-wheel drive buggy on dirt, and oh dear was it bad for me. Now, if you watched my Masters of Dirt video, you might remember that I had the caster blocks on backwards, causing me to have reverse bump steer. Couple this with the fact that the buggy did not come with a center diff, and you have a recipe for a very unstable car. Overall, 4-wheel drive buggy did not go well both in qualifying and in the mains. I ended up in 9th place overall. As for my 2-wheel drive buggy, well, that was more or less a swan song to my Losi 22 5.0, as I had gotten tired of taking apart the whole rear transmission just to get to the differential. It was its last race, and I planned to make it a good one. In qualifying, I managed to get myself into the 2nd place spot ahead of Owen Simmons and Mike Koska, another driver you hear about later, but behind another driver named Justin Sherman. The main started out pretty poorly as I once again got caught up in initial lap chaos, putting me down to 7th place. I didn't quit though. I did all I could to regain my position and drove better than I had ever done up until that point, including other races prior. And in the end, I managed to regain my 2nd place position in the final few laps and held it into the end. A nice send-off for that old 22, but it was finally time to move on. Two-wheel drive short course truck wasn't nearly as dramatic as the other times I've driven. I qualified 4th behind both Chris Van Air and Justin Sherman, both sponsored drivers, so I didn't really have a hope of catching them. But another driver I did have a chance of catching was Craig Jackson, another fast driver who I battled with back and forth all day in two-wheel drive short course truck. As for the mains, me and Craig were back and forth the whole race. There wasn't really a clear, faster driver between the two of us, and it was really fun battling it out with it for the podium. In the end, I managed to squeak by in the last 3 laps, but just barely. Like I said before, it was a fun race, which makes what comes at the end much more tragic, But before we get there, let's talk about round 14. This was the first race that I took part in that wasn't at Hobbytown Columbus. I had originally planned to go to Apex Raceway in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, but that unfortunately never panned out. In the end, the closest track to me was RC3 Raceway in Huntsville, Alabama. So I off I went with the two cars I was in point contention with, my new Yokomo YZ2 two-wheel drive buggy, and my old trusty SE 6.2 Team Associated two-wheel drive short course truck, completely bewildered by the prospect of running outdoor dirt with 10-scale cars. When I got there, I had to wait a bit for the hobby shop to open so I could buy some new tires. So by the time I got them, the track had moved past its loamy phase where something like Proline Blockades or J-Concepts Goosebumps worked well, and now they were in the Proline Hot Shots and J-Concepts Double D territory. I ended up running whole shots all day on my SET, but for two-wheel drive buggy, things changed a lot throughout the day. For two-wheel drive buggy, I ended up getting a lot of help from someone who I had never met before named Mitch Arnold, who showed me how to tune a diff for outdoor dirt, and Mike Koska, who helped me pick out tires. Qualifying went pretty well, as even though I had never actually run an outdoor track for 10 skill before, specifically two-wheel drive, my buggy seemed to handle quite nicely with the setup I had for it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which setup it was, as I pretty much just ripped the initial clay setup that I had for it, loosened the diff up a bit, and softened up the suspension with the softest stuff I had on hand, which was 30 weight in the rear and 32.5 in the front. I ended up qualifying third overall in two-wheel drive stock, and I was pretty happy with that. At this point, I was behind Mike Koska in second and Mitch Arnold in first. As for Mitch, he did something very daring. He changed his regular whole shot style tire to a web style one. This gave him insane grip on the groove section of the track, but he left it would hurt him greatly. Liking this high risk, high reward setup style, I decided to take it one step further. I ended up using some AKA clay compound scribbles that I got from one of their drivers, Justin Whitaker, which I equated to the closest thing they had to a web style for the main. And wouldn't you know it? They worked. In fact, they worked so well they led me to victory in the main. Kind of. You see, if you look at the actual post, I am standing in the middle podium holding cash. Unfortunately, though, it was later discovered that my transponder didn't register my last lap, which put me in third place overall. Kinda sucked, but there isn't much you can do at that point. As for two-wheel drive short course truck, things were a lot more standard. Once again, I qualified in fourth, which was getting kind of tiring at this point, and then the main came up. The truck handled quite nicely for the most part, as there wasn't much drama in terms of how it handled. Other than the very end when the first place driver, Ben Robbins, stopped right at the end to try and mess with me, and I ended up placing in second. Now where did this put me in the standings? Well, in two-wheel drive stock buggy, thanks to my transponder not picking up my last lap, I was in fourth place just outside the podium spot. And in two-wheel drive short course truck, I was once again in fourth place, just outside the podium spot. It all came down to the finals. With the finals coming up, I finally decided to invest in a GoPro so I could actually record myself driving. I mostly bought it for Masters of Dirt, but it would work here as well. What I didn't bring, unfortunately, was the thing I actually needed to race, specifically my short course truck. I drove 2 hours to the track only to forget to bring the thing I actually needed to race. To put it simply, I didn't do well in short course truck because I didn't even run it. In terms of points though, I did end up in fourth. Anyway, I did bring both my two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive buggies, so I was able to run those during the finals even though I wasn't in point contention with the four-wheel drive. Speaking of which, it was handling much better with the correct caster block placement. Also, since right before Masters of Dirt, I got a center diff for the YZ4 and put 200k diff fluid in there while I was running kit dirt springs and the kit dirt diff fluid in both the front and rear diffs. As a result, it actually handled fairly nicely if a bit on the twitchy side. It had plenty of grip, almost too much, and plenty of speed with a stock 13.5 motor from Hobbywing. Unfortunately, due to the excess of steering, I had a good deal of oversteer coming out of turns, but I was able to manage it fairly well by just adjusting my driving style. Qualifying went pretty well even though I was still adjusting to driving at full speed on an indoor track this large and getting over the fear of breaking something. I managed to place 6th in the mod 4-wheel drive class, and I was pretty happy with that as almost all the drivers in front of me were sponsored. As for the mains itself, it went something like this.
Drew, so does Randy, so does Jason. Oh, Andrew and Jason go for a ride. Andrew gets the fourth, so this is pandemonium. Oh, we got one up and down. Lost that body. We're broken. I'm gonna grab that body. So right now we have Chris. This Williams up into the second round. Oh, I don't know what he did on that one. Threw it straight up in the air. It was Ingrid. Still a lot of races left. We're officially halfway through, guys. Halfway through.
I see you getting frustrated, Gary. Take a deep breath.
Finish for this 30 seconds. Westfall, Williams, Simmons, Thunderbird, Brock, Juliette, Cole, that's your running order. Time for the race is over. Continue on until your name is called.
Race number 1. Jason Westfall, Todd Thunderbird done. Kate Williams done. Chris Vanier done.
You didn't lie me twice, so that's good. In the end, I climbed from 6th to 4th, which in this case I was very happy to get. Even though I missed the podium, I was in contention for the podium as I did end up in 3rd for like a solid lap if that. With that being said, it's time for the class that I put the most time and pride into. Two-wheel drive stock buggy started out pretty well for the most part. I qualified 2nd place behind Sean Harding in the stock class, and I was able to stay there pretty consistently. I was also in front of both Owen Simmons and Mike Kokoska. Unfortunately, or fortunately depending on your point of view, Sean broke in the 3rd qualifier and I guess decided not to run the main. This put me in the TQ position. With this stroke of luck in my favor, I refreshed my car and got myself ready for the main. This is what happened.
Drive stock buggy A main, last race of the series coming at you. Less than 5. And they are off. Here comes Williams. Solid hole shot being followed by Mr. Williams. All the way to Carnage. Chris gets over there, but they get out, they figure it out. Remember guys, long 7-minute race. Take your time. Gonna be a little edgy out there. There comes your leader, across the line. Here comes 2nd place, 3rd place. It's Cade, it's Owen, it's Mike, it's Gary, it's Jason. Oh, Mike with a small mistake.
Behind you, behind you, behind you, behind you, behind you! You alright, Dad?
In the triple, in the triple. Watch the triple, watch the triple, watch it. Oh, looks like Todd's got around Boyer. We'll come down the line to the closest race on the track. Oh, Boyer goes it. So does Todd. Somebody get it.
In the end, I placed first, not just in the race, but the whole year-long series for two-wheel drive stock. If Mike Kokoska managed to come in second, he would have won the series, but he ended up in third place. Owen managed to beat him, so Owen, if you're watching this, thank you. Also, a big thank you to Sean Harding for putting on this amazing racing series. Once again, if you'd like to learn more about the series itself, be sure to check the link in the description. And finally, a big thank you to you for watching to this point. You guys are awesome and I can't thank you enough. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button, comment what you thought, and subscribe if you want to see more. Also, if you want to support me another way, be sure to subscribe to my Patreon where I post updates on all my videos. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Lucas Tarka, RC World Discord server, Ben Reeves, and Casey Nixt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.